Hello everyone, tonight I'm going to change the brake lines and brake pads on my Honda 599. I've got some new parts here. I don't think these brake components, at least not the brake pads, have been replaced since the bike was new. So these are OEM brake pads, about 12,000 miles. They're quite low. I'll take the calipers off here in a second, show them to you. So I've already changed the front wheel, so I had everything already tore apart. When you replace the lines though, these banjo bolts are torqued down pretty good, so you almost always have to remount the caliper at least with one bolt. I just did one here so I could crack that bolt. But I wanted to show you the color of the liquid here, the brake fluid, I guess. You can see I don't know if you can see the debris that's kind of floating on top, but just the color of that's really dark, like a root beer kind of brown color. And that's old fluid. I don't think it's ever been replaced. So it's time to do it. You should probably do it every couple of years, or depending on if you ride in a lot of water and stuff, if you live in a really humid environment, it can soak up a lot of water in there and make your brakes soft. So I have these new brake pads and then these stainless steel brake lines. And the main reason people put stainless steel brake lines on their bike is they don't the lines themselves don't expand under pressure like the OEM rubber ones do. So more pressure is applied to the pistons and the calipers and the pads and the rotors than in the lines. So you get more feel in the brakes and more control. So I did this on my last bike on the Honda 919, and it was a great upgrade. The brakes are more responsive and the bike just feels a lot better. So I've got everything out. I won't go into too much detail about how to clean the calipers and whatnot. I might show a little bit of video, but I've basically got my brake cleaner. I like to use nitrile gloves just because, for one thing, when I clean the brake calipers, I don't want any of my oils or anything getting in the calipers. Plus, this stuff's pretty toxic. It's not good to get on your skin a lot, so it's nice to have some gloves for that. I'll get everything tore apart. I'm gonna actually clean the calipers completely like I've done on my other video. I'm gonna split the calipers, pop the pistons out, clean everything out inside real good with the brake cleaner, and then put it back together with new pads, put the lines on. One thing I'm trying different tonight, and it was from a tip on another member on Wrist Twisters, was before replacing the lines to zip tie the brake lever to the handlebar. That way you're keeping pressure inside the master cylinder. And then we'll just pull this line off, put the new line on, and then we'll just I'll start bleeding from the bottom, putting pressure in. And what it'll do is it'll keep the master cylinder from sucking air into the lines. And so hopefully I can just push some fluid up and get the bubbles right out through the top. If there's pressure already on the lines from here up from the bottom, then it'll just push that air right out. So we'll see if that works any different. If not, just doing a standard reverse bleed isn't too hard. Okay, I've got the brand new lines here. If you'll notice, one of them is longer than the other, and that's on purpose. These are the two front lines. Seeing as the master cylinder is on the right hand side of the bike, the line going to the left caliper has to be a little bit longer. So easy to figure out. One thing I wanted to mention, if you've never replaced brake lines before, or if you're having leaks in your brake lines or something, so just a little description. This here is called the banjo bolt, and it has holes in it going through the center and on the outside. This is how brake lines work. So there's the hole inside the banjo fitting. So when your banjo bolt is inside, the fluid can squeeze through the hole and then inside the bolt in there up into, well, both the calipers and the master cylinder. That's how fluid flows. These washers that are on either side of this fitting, there's supposed to be one on each side, are called crush washers. And they do exactly that. They're a soft metal. They're designed to crush and seal any imperfections in the surfaces of the lines and the bolt. Now these crush washers are replaceable. You can sometimes get away with reusing them. I have and do. If I have any leaks though, of course, use new ones. When you get new lines, for example, this one came with new banjo bolts, because I've got 2 lines now instead of 1. So I've got a double banjo bolt here, and then the ones for the calipers. And I will reuse these bolts and these crush washers. You don't want to reuse crush washers too much, because what happens is they get too many imperfections in them, and when you try and torque them down, you get a leak, and then you think, well, I better tighten it some more, and so you tighten it some more, and you can end up over torquing your bolts and actually break them. These are designed to, they really don't have to be torqued down very much, but they can be kind of weak here in the middle because they've got a hole in them and they're fairly thin. So most of the time they're just aluminum. So crush washers are cheap. You can buy them in bulk. I recommend reusing new ones if you get new lines, especially if you replace the cables. If you're careful, I've noticed if you're careful with the old ones, when you take them off, keep them in order and keep them in the same way that they came on. For example, if it came on this way, don't turn it around, put it back on the other way. Try and keep them on the same direction, and that way the surfaces mate a little better and you have a better chance of sealing with less torque. So that's a quick explanation of what the banjo bolts are, what the brake lines are, and how they work. So now I'm going to route the cables up underneath, through the triples here, and then up to the master cylinder. We'll get everything tied in, and I will bleed some fluid in. The next step I'm going to do, which I'll show in this video as well, is I'm going to start taking the calipers apart and clean those, and I'll show you how to take the pads out of those. All right, taking the pads out of a caliper is pretty easy. If you look on the back of the caliper here, you can of course see the pads. They're supposed to be semi-free floating. They're supposed to move around. You may have to, depending on if you can get them out, you may have to use a screwdriver to gently pry the pistons back and push them back out of place. If you have the caliper off the bike, of course, you'll want to be careful, because you will lose some fluid out of there. So right here is the pin, and you can see the spring in the back, and that spring's supposed to be in there to help the caliper stay in place. We need to take that pin out, and these calipers will actually rotate completely out of place and come right out of the caliper. So we take this little cap off with a flathead screwdriver. I've already loosened it. All that does is reveal the that pin in there, and we'll use either a T-handle or some other get in position here. Alright. Sorry for the shaky video here. Those are kind of torqued down. So we loosen that, pull this pin out. And sometimes you'll get to the end of the pin and it'll just sit and spin, and the threads are already out. See right there, I think I'm already out. We just need to knock it out from the other side. So yeah, see, we're already through. So it gets dirty, that pin gets dirty, and you just have to kind of work it out. Actually, something you can do is take a smaller T-handle, and it's kind of hard to do with one hand here. There we go. So there's our pin, which I will clean all that off so that it goes on easy. Here's our pads, and they literally just come right out. They hook on this bottom side, and they come right out. Now these pads, you can see there's a little groove in here. That little groove is kind of your, shows your how much brake pad you have. If you notice, if you can see it, there's a little more brake pad just underneath that bottom of the groove. So when you hit the bottom of that groove, that's where you know you have end of life. The reason I'm changing these pads is the wear on these ones has kind of been a little different. I've noticed that my caliper on the front, or excuse me, the piston on the front here, the larger one, is probably sticking because this pad has been wearing towards the back. So if you look at the back of this caliper, I'm already at the wear mark. The front has some life left, so these pads are done for. I need to put new pads on. So anyways, that's how you take the pads out. This little clip pops loose. Remember which way it goes. It usually only goes one way, so you'll put that back in. I will completely clean this, and I'll pop those pots out and clean everything up and put it all back together. If you watch my other videos on how to actually bleed a line, you'll see how I do that, but I'm pretty much going to put everything back together, put the calipers back on the bike, crack the bleed valve with my line here full of fluid already, and I will start pushing fluid back up the lines. You know, get all the air back up into there, and then keep sucking the old fluid out of the master cylinder. Wait till I get good color in there, and then get pressure on the lines, and that's all you have to do. So that's changing brake lines on a motorbike. This is a 599. Again, pay attention to those crush washers. I have broken, you know, in my stupid days, I guess, I have broken one of these because I tried reusing bad crush washers and I over torqued the bolt. I was lucky I was able to get it back out of the master cylinder, so just be careful with that. I can't remember if I mentioned it in the earlier video, but when I did take these calipers off, if you notice, again, these bolts have red Loctite on them, and they are a bugger to get out sometimes. I'm not going to put red Loctite back on these. I'm going to put a little bit of blue, only to keep them from vibrating out, basically. Again, the torque on these bolts is on the side. You know, on the side, it's not a shear force, or not a strip force, I guess. The force is sideways, so they don't really need to be in there super tight. They need to be snug, of course, but a lot of people over torque those, including myself. I've broken one of these too. So thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully that makes sense. Putting everything back together is pretty easy. Of course, I'm going to put the same pads back in after it's cleaned up and rebleed the system, and we will be done. And I'd like to do a ride review and see how much better it is. The brakes on this bike were okay, but I know how much better they could be with some stainless steel lines and some fresh fluid. So I'll be doing the rear as well. I don't think I'll need to do a video on that. Again, self-explanatory. All right, thanks again for watching, guys.